When I look at something, I'll generally see it for the absurdity it is, which I think taking that approach of just everything is absurd, I'm absurd, but how does something unthought of before happen? How does it evolve? It comes out of absurdity. You know, the fact that we have pets in our home is absurd. I really had in the back of my mind to want to do something regarding prosthetics and amputations because a really close dear friend of mine was born without a fibula, and so she had her foot removed when she was an infant. And so the doctor basically said to her parents, either we cut it off and she grows up wearing a prosthetic, or she has to wear a brace the rest of her life. Current prosthetics, as amazing as they are, I feel as though they're not acknowledging the human form or what's important for an emotional connection to humanness. I've been called JW since I was a kid, but I'm known as J. McGill Winston. I came over in the fall of 2012 to go to CSM and do another bachelor's, but this time in product design. My first one was in metalworking, which then moved into multimedia, specifically sound and film installations. So it's always been about kind of making things, creating environments, creating moods, creating something that kind of touches an emotion. So with product design, it was something that really allowed me to combine my love of science with design and put something in the hands of people. When I was kind of in the beginnings of moving into the design direction from my dissertation, I was talking to my stage leader because I knew I kind of wanted to mix up a medical procedure with a design outcome. And so I'm talking to him about it and, kind of going, I think I'm thinking about 3D processes of, reconstruction from the inside out. And, he was kind of nodding his head like, yeah, okay. But then when we were done and he said, yeah, I think you're okay to go with that, Rob Kessler came over to me and he had been listening to the conversation I was having with my course leader. And he approached me and he said, I heard what you were talking about. I'm doing this project with MA students and Imperial College. Dr. Roger Kneebone specifically is coming in to do a pop-up surgery environment, and I think you might be interested in it. And it was just kind of like it completely opened up my world. I learned about osseointegration, which is most commonly understood as something similar to when you have a tooth implant, where they literally drill into the jawbone, implant a titanium post, which then the skin seals up around that, and then they screw a tooth implant, a prosthetic, over that. That's when I started taking the idea of, okay, what if I took osseointegration, changed the medical procedure using titanium, which is biocompatible, basically recreated the leg, from the inside out. Once I had that in my head, that was the bee in the bonnet, and I just started moving from that. This itself was 3D printed. So the whole process, the medical procedure that I developed building upon current osseointegration was actually practiced through this. It wasn't just speculative. It was like, all right, I'm gonna take a tibia. I'm gonna scan it. I'm gonna take that scan, that file, and put it in another file, that I got from scanning this. Once that's in place, then I'm gonna take that file, give it to the 3D printer, have it printed, and this is the result. And so, then the real kind of final piece was, all right, let's see if it works. And then taking the original tibia that I had scanned and placing it in and having a perfect fit was a really amazing moment, much less than through working with some surgeons, vascular surgeons at St. Mary's Hospital here in London. I was able to go to and witness an amputation and literally stand right next to the doctor as he was amputating a man's leg, a below the knee amputee. And, you know, seeing how the procedure is, how the skin and the muscle is pulled back from the bone, how the bone is actually cut. And he knew of the project, and I said, when the bone was exposed, you know, basically saying to him, if I had a titanium post, had done the scan, could we do this? And he was like, absolutely. Now, that's all and good, but unfortunately, I think there's a lot of medical procedures and implants that take place of, you know, creating solutions, but not really thinking about, you know, the emotions or the connection for the user to the implant itself. And what I wanted to do was create something that, you know, created an ownership for the user, you know, the amputee, where they enjoyed having it.
I'm Manuel Moreno. So I've been amputated right leg below the knee because a lorry crushed my foot. So in order to do that, they have to leave a piece in order to attach things. So this is the socket, which goes over the limb, and then below the socket is various pieces of metal and carbon, which is eventually attached to this sort of model. Sorry, like that, more or less. And I mean, the engineering side, I'm not an engineer, so I don't think engineering. But as I understand it, the basics are pretty simple, you know, very simple. And obviously, you know, they film people walking and how they do it, how they do this, how they do it when they're injured or whatever. So I'm sure you've done this yourself. And so you develop these concepts. But to me, they still seem very, with all the technology in the world, they still seem rather behind. I don't know. Maybe I'm keen for action, movement. You know, your leg or your ear or your nose is yours, but you're not constantly looking at it thinking, you know, this is mine, this is mine.
Yeah.
That's not.
Yeah.
Well, that one's not mine. This one's mine. But you're brought up knowing that it's yours. You don't have to go on about it. You know, you might get a bit worried because it's like this or like that.
Yeah.
You know, through life and your teenage years or later on in life when you get older, perhaps. But yeah, the sense of ownership is important, I think. Yeah, yeah. And I think it helps you feel more intimate with the object. But I think, in my experience, and I've only done this for 2 years, is that the object is still very much an object. I think that's a really interesting idea, because I think it's something which is feasible. I think it's something which is creative. You could have different colours, different shapes, and I think that would, on a personal level, you could have your own shape, you know, so you could feel that it's yours.
I had an operating system. You know, I took a medical procedure, created an operating system, but the hardware needed to be cohesive to that operating system. It's about that emotional connection that's happening to me at that moment. And, you know, you get there from a sketch to working, you know, in just really fast card, you know, with materials just to kind of go like, okay, what's the form looking like? You know, I'll also work, you know, I'll take mesh and just start moving it. And because even though will sketch, it's about the 3D, because ultimately this is 3D. This is about seeing something with volume, seeing something with form. I really enjoy working in plasticine because, you know, I can talk on the phone, I can watch telly, I can listen to the, you know, I can sit out on a porch, I can go to a cafe, and I can just start moving shapes. And it's something where you don't have to be precious. And, you know, I can get to a form and maybe see something that it's maybe not really happening now. But if I'm like, you know what, there's a silhouette there, I just do it and I take a picture of it, and then I have that, and then I can start fresh again. The way you use plasticine is by touching it, by molding it. And that is, to me, such a sensory connection as a maker, designer. That's crucial to my practice. Looking at current prosthetics and shoe forms, obviously the blade made out of steel or carbon fiber has been really popular, but it also, what it does for spring, for support, for balance, maneuverability has been really strong. So I wanted to still design something that created a feeling of wanting to touch it. And when this is on, that if somebody took their foot off, even though they don't have nerve feelings to it, there's a feeling of like, oh, let me, you know, wipe off my foot. And I enjoy doing it. It's not like, oh, I'm touching something creepy. You know, much less if somebody, if they're with a partner or a friend and they take off their shoes, there's not that self-consciousness of like, I have just like a metal plate coming out of my leg. And by developing that with a connection based on a pneumatic airlock, which is this, and the idea of this is essentially a version of this male and female. The male part is part of the 3D printed bone extension. And then this part is inside the ankle element. So then when somebody, you know, essentially steps into this, no tools are needed. You just pull down on the collar and lock in. And the idea of using that versus a tool where you need spanners, which are current, you know, they're either wrenches, screws, nuts, bolts. Having something like this removes the need of tools, and by removing the tools, brings it back to human. My mantra all along has been that I came to when I was doing the research, you know, because I was looking at evolution and kind of thinking, you know, where we started, where were we, where are we going? But the bottom line, and especially within design, it's like for something to evolve, it has to begin. And if you don't do your first sketch, your first prototype, you know, like it's going to change. But for something to evolve, it needs to begin. And as soon as I had that in my head, I lost all the fear of making mistakes or doing something wrong, because I'm not a doctor. And what that quote, what that mantra allowed me to do was keep moving forward, because this is about change. It's about change within the idea of thinking of osseointegration surgical procedure. It's about the change that's happening within the prosthetic world. And you have to start somewhere. And as much as I would love to see the first person wearing this with this exact kind of form and catching a glimpse of someone down the street with this design, I know it's going to change, and that's okay.
It's so nice.
I'm from the Northeast, you know, Boston area. After graduating, I could have gone back to Boston and continued work on this, as Boston is probably in the States one of the medical hubs, medical science technology hubs, with MIT Media Lab, with the hospitals, with all, you know, IDO, a lot of design consultancies that are based in medical science. But I felt as though CSM, Imperial, St. Mary's, all, my collective is where this came from. Yeah, it came from my head, but it was the support of all these people. It was the environment. It was the encouragement of it's okay to be a designer working in medical. And we want to hear about it. I felt as though this community in London really embraced the idea, and I feel confident that this is something that is important. And in a way, I kind of want to give back to the place and the community that has given me so much. It's that whole kind of like pay it forward. The motivation of this project wasn't about this is all for me. This is going to be my leg and nobody else's. This was about doing something for potential amputees, for people with residual limbs, to kind of like think of it bigger. I think the hardest thing that I've had to kind of grasp with and kind of redesign is the whole idea of what a user is. And yes, technically for me, the user are amputees, but I don't think of these people that I've built these relationships with, that I've gone to, sketches and, prototypes and ideas with, and inappropriate questions as users. It's like they're part of my team. I'm part of their team. We're all a collective. And so that has been, how I refer to this, is it's a collective of designers, surgeons, medical professionals and experts and amputees and people without, with residual limbs. The importance of design and art with medical and science is, it's tapped, but it's not exploited. And things can be exploited brilliantly and for the good of the world. And I think that's where the support of the collective is leading me toward. I guess I really don't have any other choice than to do it because it's really all I know. I'm eternally going to be the freak, but I embrace it. It's worked for me. It's, it's what I know. And I hope it seems to be embraced by others. And, you surround yourself with those. And for those who don't get it, you then become a different form of amusement. So, yeah, I play with chicken bones.